So when I first moved to Georgia from the Northeast, I'll be honest, I absolutely hated it. I wanted to get out right away. But it did grow on me, and I can honestly say now that I love living in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So in today's video, I'm going to share my story of moving to the South from the Northeast and share some of the differences and some of the things that I hated and some of the things that I grew to love. Coming up right now. Hey everyone, welcome back to Living in Atlanta. This YouTube channel's all about what it's like to live in Atlanta. My name is Mark and I moved to Atlanta in 2008, so at this point it's been about 14 years, which honestly with all the transplants here almost makes me a local at this point, which is hard to believe I'm saying, but the reality is I grew up in the Northeast. I was born in Boston, but I grew up mostly in New Jersey and New York. So very much a Northeast guy with all the cultural experiences that brings. Coming down to the South was a huge challenge. And I often talk about a lot of the practical aspects of relocating to Atlanta, finding the right neighborhood, how to buy a home in a competitive market and all that good stuff. But it's actually the cultural differences that can be the hardest for people, that can be the most shocking for people, and just can be really difficult to adapt to. So that's what I'm going to talk about in today's video. I'm just going to share my story of going from growing up in the Northeast with a fast-paced melting pot culture to the heart of the South, Atlanta, Georgia, completely different culture. Everything could just not be more different from what I grew up with. So I'm gonna share my experience. Hopefully that gives you some insight, whether you're from the Northeast or from another part of the state. Hopefully some of my stories can give you some insight and help you wherever you're at with your journey. So before we get into the story, as always, if you have any real estate needs in the Atlanta area, please call us up. That's why we make these videos. And at this point, honestly, our real estate team probably helps more people relocate to the Atlanta area than any other agent in the city. So we have a lot of experience doing this exact thing. So if you're, relocating, making the move, if you're buying a home in Atlanta, give us a call, set up a Zoom meeting, because we got you covered. So wherever you're from in the States, obviously you have a culture in your area. You probably do. You may be in an area with no culture at all, but if you're coming from the Pacific Northwest, that's a very distinct culture. Southern California has a distinct culture. Obviously, we're going to talk about the culture in the Northeast, and the Midwest has its own culture. So, when you make the move to another part of the country, in addition to all the practical details that you have to go through, you have to confront the cultural differences, and these can often be the hardest for people, right? You're comfortable with what you grew up with, whether it's good or bad. It's what you know, it's what you grew up with. So when you move away from those things, when you go into an area with a very different culture, different customs, different foods, different ways of doing things, that can be one of the hardest transitions. So I'm just going to share some of those transitions that I went through so that you can know what to expect if this is you, and you can just prepare and make sure that this is the right area for you. So like I said, I'm really from the Northeast. I've lived in a bunch of different areas in the Northeast. I was born in Boston. I spent most of my time growing up in New Jersey and then New York, in a suburb of the city about 45 minutes north of the city in Rockland County, which is a very nice suburb of New York City. So, not a New York City kid, but obviously spent a lot of time there and definitely was exposed to, a lot of different cultures because, New York and the surrounding areas, definitely a melting pot. So when I was 18, I got up and left New York. I actually moved to Baltimore and lived there for about 4 or 5 years to be closer to my now wife, who was living there at the time. So again, all over the Northeast, and I will say, Baltimore's kind of in that middle ground. It definitely has some Southern culture, but I think it's more of a Northeastern city than it is a Southern city at the end of the day. So lived in Baltimore for a few years, and then my wife's parents made the move down to Georgia to buy an alpaca farm, if you can believe that. For whatever reason, they decided to do that. We're very close with her family. We had no ties to Baltimore. You know, we were very young, didn't have to be in a certain place, so we followed them down there. You know, we made the move down to the Atlanta, Georgia area, lived in Loganville for a little bit, lived in Snellville for a little bit before we moved into the city. So that is what brought us to Georgia, to be closer to family. I had really never expected myself to be living in the South, never expected to be living in the Atlanta area. And honestly, I hated it at first. I really did. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I really was not enjoying my time. I remember, you know, driving into Georgia for the first time. It was so different. Trees are different, the roads are different, you know, the layout is different. Everything was so different from the Northeast. And, you know, thinking about some of the hardest things for me, first of all, you know, there's none of your comfort foods, right? When you move to a different part of the country, depending on what that is, for me, I didn't have any delis anymore, you know? I didn't have a great Italian or Jewish deli where I could get a great sandwich or, you know, get a great bagel. Honestly, you really still don't have that in Atlanta. To this day, there's really no great delis in Atlanta, unfortunately. That's something, as a New Yorker, you grow up with. The bodegas, being able to get an egg sandwich, you know, at a convenience store at any time of the day, you know, that does not exist at all in the Atlanta area. I still have not had a really good bagel down here, although I get lots of recommendations for bagel places. It just hasn't quite made the cut for me. There is really solid pizza here, though. I'll say Antico, which is a Neapolitan style pizza, is very, very good and holds up to a lot of New York pizza. So you can get some really good pizza down here. But, you know, the diner, right? You have Waffle House down here, which is fantastic. But where I grew up, you know, every few streets you had a really good diner with, you know, a menu that was like 50 pages long, where you could get everything from, you know, a BLT to pasta to a steak at any time of night, which, you know, again, it's just what you grow up with. It's just those comforting things. To me, you know, a diner like that was very comforting. You still really don't have that down here. So those were some of the main differences at first, not having those comfort foods. So wherever you're coming from in a different part of the country, you know, thinking about whatever comfort food looks like to you, it may or may not be here in the South. You know, then there was the people, right? And the people were just very different. And I think one of the things I still struggle with to this day is the pace of living, okay? And when you grow up in the Northeast, for whatever reason, for good or for bad, you're used to a quick pace of living. You get where you have to go quickly. You are aware of your surroundings. You're aware of your impact on other people's lives. There's so many people interacting and interconnected that, you know, you're very aware of how you impact other people. You get where you have to go. You move quickly. You walk quickly. You talk quickly. And that is not the case in the South, okay? People in the South move slow. Okay, they're not slow people. Okay, they're intelligent people, but they move slow. And if you're from the South and you're watching this, like, I don't know what he's talking about. We don't move slow. Well, I hate to break it to you, but yeah, you do. You move slow compared to other parts of the country, which, listen, I'm not even saying that's bad. I don't think it's necessarily good to be moving quick and be stressed out and, you know, be annoyed with people who are moving slow. It's just what I grew up with, right? This is just my personal experience. One of the big differences, the big cultural differences coming from the Northeast to the South, they're not in a rush. Even if they're in a rush, they're not really in a rush, honestly. And, you know, what's interesting is that people from New York have a lot of attitude. They're rude. People from the South are very nice. They'll talk to you. And I see what people are saying with that, but I kind of disagree. First of all, New Yorkers will always be my favorite people. Again, this is what I grew up with. But, you know, New Yorkers to me are real salt of the earth. Everywhere in the Northeast, you know, New Yorkers and people from Boston, honestly, they're the same thing. Philly, okay, New Jersey. People from these areas don't suffer fools, okay? And they mind their business. They get where they have to go. They're not rude unless you are infringing on whatever they have going on or, you know, where they're trying to go. But if you ingratiate yourself with them, if they get to know you and like you, if you're with it, they'll give you the shirt off their back. They really will. They will go, you know, above and beyond for you. And I also find that people in the Northeast are much more aware of their impact on other people and on the culture and the melting pot that exists in that area. Whereas people in the South, by contrast, they will talk to you, and they will have a more surface level connection with you more easily, which I think makes a lot of people feel comfortable and disarmed. But it's also like handle your own stuff, kind of, it's more of a, I guess, libertarian kind of like handle your own business. Not saying people in the South will never help you, but it's like a surface niceness and then underneath like deal with your own crap, versus in New York where it's like a surface toughness or roughness, and then underneath like they'll literally do anything for you. Once you're in with them, you're like family. So again, one is not worse than the others, and this is completely anecdotal, right? It's not like this is based on research studies, but that is my experience. That was one of the hardest things for me to go through. Just different foods, different culture, different people, slower pace of living, being only worried about yourself, not being as worried about how you're impacting what other people have going on in their life. It's just very different. Now, the other big change for me, especially when we moved into the city of Atlanta, was, just what was the culture of Atlanta? I couldn't figure it out. For a while there, I'll be honest, I was like, Atlanta really doesn't have any culture. Right when I say New Orleans, you probably think of, the jazz culture and, the seafood and being a port city and music and festivals and Mardi Gras. It's a very definable, easily recognizable culture. Same thing with like a New York City, same thing with probably like a San Francisco or a Portland. Boston obviously has a very distinct culture. I couldn't really figure out what was the culture in Atlanta. There were not a lot of like old established mom and pop businesses, a lot of corporate businesses. Atlanta has had a lot of companies from other states set up franchises that expand in the Atlanta area. You don't get a lot of that mom and pop independent business in Atlanta. It does exist, but it's a little bit more of a mishmash. Now, this may have something to do with the fact that Atlanta pretty much burned to the ground twice. Sherman burned nearly 3,000 buildings back in 1864, and then in 1917, practically all the old Fourth Ward burned down in a horrific fire. So maybe that has contributed to it somewhat, but it's a little bit harder to define just the culture of Atlanta. Now looking back on it, after being here 14 years, it's a little bit more clear to me, the culture, right? Obviously, the civil rights movement is a huge part of the culture in Atlanta, a huge part of our history. The music scene, especially related to hip hop, I mean, the epicenter of, Southern hip hop is Atlanta. And honestly, entrepreneurship is one of the defining cultural characteristics of Atlanta, in my opinion. You very much have a atmosphere and environment of people going and starting their own business. We have a lot of entrepreneurs in Atlanta, a lot of very successful entrepreneurs, and I think that is part of the culture here. We don't have as a defined like thumbprint. It's the South, it's great music, it's soul food, it's the civil rights movement, but there's not the same type of history as a lot of older cities or cities that didn't burn twice, and they are a little bit less independent businesses. That when you have new developments in Atlanta, unfortunately, a lot of the corporations come into town. The Smoothie King or the Starbucks or whatever it is, and I know this is the case in a lot of other cities, but it is a little bit more like Florida in that sense, and like some areas of Florida are just a little bit more generic. Listen, Atlanta does obviously have culture. It has a great culture, and it's not my culture, right? I'm a white Jewish guy from New York coming into like 58% black city with a lot of roots and things that I'm not familiar with and that I didn't grow up with. So it's not a surprise to me that the culture was a bit of a mystery at first. That was one of the harder things for me to deal with. I was very critical of Atlanta for that reason, but again, I've come to really appreciate the culture in Atlanta, especially the entrepreneurship. It really is a city where if you're an entrepreneur, if you have a dream, if you want to start a business, this is one of the best places in the country to do it. So like I said, some of the challenges for me, I didn't have my comfort foods. The pace of living was completely different. I couldn't really get a handle for the culture of Atlanta, but it did grow on me. I really do love Atlanta now. Obviously, I have a whole YouTube where all I talk about is Atlanta. I've got 1,000 reasons why I love Atlanta. So what changed? What grew on me in this city? I would say, one of the things was definitely the weather. As I grow older, I feel like my blood gets thinner every year. So having a mild climate without crazy winters where you're shoveling a driveway or have major delays because of snow, that definitely grew on me. The weather in Atlanta is absolutely fantastic. You have 4 distinct seasons, but you have a very mild winter. So it's really the best of both worlds, in my opinion. The people did grow on me, right? As you make friends in a new area, you establish relationships with people, and that really helps you feel settled and feel connected to the community. So now I have some of my closest friends in this area, which obviously makes me feel more at home. And like any area in the country, there are wonderful people and there are not so wonderful people. So you just have to find your people in any area that you're in. And the nature, really the nature, honestly, more than anything, is just absolutely something I fell in love with living in the Atlanta area. I talk about this all the time. City in a forest, the mountains, the rivers, the lakes, the green spaces, the parks, the trees everywhere. It really is a beautiful state that's close to other very beautiful states. It's a great place to be if you like to be outdoors, if you like to hike, if you like to be on the water, if you like to camp, if you just like to be in a park around trees. That is one of the best things about living down here. And honestly, like I said, more than anything else, starting and growing my business here helped me fall in love with Atlanta. This really is and feels like a city of opportunity. I've talked in the past about we have tons of Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies headquartered here. We have a very diverse economy. So, we're not dependent on like shipping. We're not dependent on healthcare. We have shipping, we have healthcare, we have banking, we have finance, we have tech, we have higher education. So we're very diverse when it comes to the job industries. It's one of the best places to start or continue your career at a new company. And for me, starting my real estate business here, of course that can be intimidating, but it's not like New York. I think I would have been much more intimidated to start a real estate company in New York City. You really feel like the smallest fish in the biggest pond, where Atlanta, it is a big city. There are a lot of people here, but for whatever reason, I feel like it's a very manageable city in a lot of different aspects. I feel like, you can get to know people in high level. You can get to know people in high places here. It's easier to make connections here. People are very big on networking and making connections. There's a lot of support for, independent businesses and entrepreneurship here. And people really respect the hustle and the grind in Atlanta. So that is another thing that I really came to love and appreciate about living here and starting my business here. After 14 years of living here, I can honestly say I really do love it. I found my area in like the Grant Park area. We've lived here most of that time, in and around Grant Park, which I absolutely love. We found our people, right? You got to find your people wherever you are, make those relationships, invest in those friendships. It'll really help you feel at home and supported. And, we found our business. My wife started her business here. I started my business here, grew that up, got connected with the community, got connected with the people that we were serving around here. So those are the things that help you get established and ingrained in a neighborhood to feel like you're at home, to feel like you can really love it. Now, obviously for some people, Atlanta just won't be for them. And you can move somewhere else. Of course, you got to find where you're comfortable. But all that being said, as someone from the Northeast, from a very different place in the country, very different upbringing, coming to the Southeast, coming to Atlanta, those were some of the biggest challenges. Those were some of the things that I absolutely fell in love with. I hope that provided you some insight. Hopefully, if you're thinking of making the move, be confident that there is a lot to love about the area. You just got to give it a chance. It's a great place for opportunity and for building something. I think the future is absolutely bright. I mean, Atlanta is just going to grow and grow like crazy for a ton of different reasons. So it's a great place to get your foot in the door and build something, whether that's just owning a home or starting a business or getting a new position at a different company headquartered in Atlanta. For 1,000 different reasons, this can be a great place to call home. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope it provided you some value. I'm going to put up some links to some other videos that you can watch right after this one. If you're trying to decide if Atlanta could be the right place for you, I'm going to talk about why I love Atlanta, why I hate Atlanta, so you can get kind of more of a full picture. I hit on a lot of the same points, but there's a lot of information on my channel, so you can hit the playlist and just dive in and get to know absolutely everything you would want to know about moving here, relocating here, living here, buying and selling a home here. So it's all there, free content for you to check out. So keep watching the videos. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.